No one is using Bumble. This app was at the top of their game. 58 million users, a $2.2 billion IPO, over $1 billion in revenue. Now, look at that stock graph. Down 95%. Revenue is falling, profit has collapsed, and users are fleeing. What happened? As it turns out, something much bigger is happening. Dating apps across the board are dying, and Bumble is the biggest loser. To understand what happened, we need to look at why Bumble worked, and that brings us to its founder, Whitney Wolfe Herd, who actually co-founded Tinder. Reportedly, Herd gave Tinder its name and logo, leading its aggressive marketing on campus. Pretty pivotal. But then, she was forced out. A lawsuit quickly emerged, which eventually led to a settlement of a bit over $1 million. Sounds like a lot, but considering how big Tinder was becoming, Herd was done pretty dirty. But she soon had another opportunity from Tinder's rival, Badoo. Andre Andreev, the entrepreneur behind the dating app with over 425 million registered users worldwide, had spent years trying to break into the American market, with mixed results. Then he saw the lawsuit. Herd seemed like the perfect fit. He wanted her to become Badoo's CMO, but she pitched something else. Bumble. This time, if two people matched, the woman had to message first. If you didn't use these apps, that might sound strange. Why do that? To quote Herd herself, what if women made the first move, send the first message? And if they don't, the match disappears after 24 hours, like in Cinderella, the pumpkin and the carriage. What if we could hardwire that into a product? Andreev didn't love the idea, but he trusted Herd. He offered $10 million in funding, but in exchange, he would own 79% of Bumble. Though Herd would have total creative control, and Bumble could use Badoo's software infrastructure, a huge head start. In just the first 5 months, Bumble passed 100,000 downloads. In 8 months, over 5 million unique conversations in-app. Then, from 1 million downloads in 2015 to 8 million the next year to 12 to 17. Revenue was climbing and passed 200 million. Women loved this app, but so did a lot of men, who often felt a lot of pressure to make the first move on Tinder. Plus, this was by design. I'm so tired of this notion that women only need to support women. Why can't we all support each other? I've run into women who can be highly problematic, detrimental, and mean, just like I've seen that in men. The one difference of women messaging first really was huge. Then, out of nowhere, came a road bump. A big one. While Bumble was doing great, Andreev's empire was imploding, but not for the reasons you might expect. As the PR was getting worse and worse, Andreev sold his stake in Magic Lab, a parent of Bumble and Badoo, to Blackstone for $3 billion. Bumble was now owned by the world's largest private equity firm. Though Herd kept her 19% stake, and the entire operation was merged into Bumble Inc., with her as CEO. I think Blackstone saw that the real thing making money was Bumble. So it worked out well for Herd, and by now, Bumble was unstoppable. It was America's fastest growing dating app. Revenue jumped from 240 million to over 330 million. Then came the moment everything was building toward. February 11th, 2021, the IPO. It started with shares priced at $43, raising $2.2 billion. The stock opened at $76, jumping more than 76% in a single day. Almost overnight, the market valued Bumble at roughly $14 billion. At 31, Whitney Wolfe Herd was now a billionaire, and still with an 11.6% stake. Everything was going great. Then Bumble made a change, and a critical one at that. One which started a long chain of dominoes that would lead to the app's collapse. Something strange happened after the IPO. Just months later, on September 9th, 2021, Bumble announced Blackstone would be selling 18 million shares at $54 a share. So why does this matter? Well, it gives us some very important context. Private equity firms like Blackstone are built to buy companies, grow them fast, then sell them at the highest possible price. And that's on top of the $2 billion of shares it sold during the IPO. Though it wasn't all their shares in Bumble, so keep that in mind. But investors began to think, maybe Bumble had already peaked? And in a way, they were right. Nonetheless, this sent the stock down. But Blackstone wasn't done yet. Keep them in mind for later. In the meantime, there was finally a bit of good news. In 2021, Bumble reported $286 million in net income, its first profitable year ever. Then, in February 2023, Bumble forecasted revenue growth even above projections. This was big, but something else made this seem even better. Herd's old opponent, Tinder, was struggling. Tinder, aka their parent Match Group, forecasted revenue below expectations, their first ever quarterly decline. While Bumble's paying users increased 25% to 2.6 million, 147,000 growing quarter over quarter, Tinder was falling off. At least, that's how it seemed. So the board approved a $150 million stock buyback program. Basically, they thought the market undervalued Bumble, and this was big. Showing they were succeeding while Tinder struggled pushed the market cap from about $3 billion to $6.5 billion. Not an all-time peak, but this was a great sign. Maybe Bumble was just getting started? Unfortunately, you might notice the rest of the graph. Tinder wasn't really struggling. It was more that the entire industry began to struggle. Global dating app downloads had fallen from 287 million in 2020 to around 237 million by 2023, a 17% drop in just 3 years. Tinder's paying users started shrinking and kept shrinking, down to 9.3 million, with quarterly revenue dropping to 491 million. Match Group, Tinder's parent company, had lost nearly 80% of its peak value. Then, the same happened to Bumble, a gigantic share drop in August. So, what was happening? Among college and graduate students in the US, 79% said they weren't using dating apps at all. By 2023, around 61% of users were between 30 and 49 years old. I think many millennials, the generation that helped dating apps explode, were slowly aging out of app-based dating, while Gen Z weren't as keen. In late 2023, Herd stepped down from the CEO role and was replaced by Lydian Jones, who led Salesforce's Slack. Herd might have been a good visionary leader for Bumble. Jones wasn't. She had big plans, but they were all pretty awful. First, she laid off 350 employees. Then, just 2 months later, she announced a new feature called Opening Moves. For the first time in Bumble's history, women no longer had to message first. Instead, women could post prompts on their profile for men to respond to. Not exactly the same as Tinder, but it was pretty darn close. It's basically just Tinder now. Giving both parties the ability to drive first engagement while pretending it's women is a good way to have your cake and eat it too. The novelty of woman initiating is why I opened an account with Bumble. Take that away and Bumble will just fall out of the circulation of apps I check in on. I genuinely don't know what Jones was thinking. You need to change things for sure, but why do this? Why remove what makes your app stand out? Unfortunately for Bumble, things were only getting worse. We just passed 900,000 subscribers, and I just want to say thank you all so much. This ride has been awesome, and we're almost at 1 million now. Unsurprisingly, Bumble's market value had collapsed to around $1 billion. Then, after just 1 year as CEO, Lydian Jones quit, along with Bumble's CFO and CMO. The entire leadership team behind the rebrand was suddenly gone, leaving Herd back in control as CEO. I am deeply grateful for the transformative work Lydian has led during such a pivotal time for Bumble, and her leadership has been instrumental in building a strong foundation for our future. I'm pretty sure Herd was just saving face for Jones here. Regardless, she was back, though she didn't really want to be. I had no intention of coming back. Bumble needs me back. It's an extension of me to some degree, and watching it fall from its peak has been very hard. She now had to clean up this mess, and unfortunately, the industry was in a pretty bad spot. In just 12 months, Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge lost roughly 1.1 million users in the UK. 78% of Gen X, 80% of millennials, and 79% of Gen Z were burnt out of dating apps. Over time, the unfortunate misgivings of being on a dating app can cause someone to lose hope in the dating process and finding the right person. But it gets worse. By this time, Blackstone had also cashed out big time. They sold 11 million shares in 2023, then another 11 million in 2024, each time the price per share dropping lower. They had made about $2 billion from the investment, though Bumble stock was now down 94%. And we're still not done. Match Group had returned even stronger, not with Tinder, but Hinge. By 2025, Hinge was generating $691 million in revenue. Just 7 years earlier, it had made only $8 million. The app had exploded to around 32 million users worldwide, with nearly 2 million paying subscribers. By this point, a date was being set up on Hinge every 2 seconds. So why was Hinge exploding? Hinge had a unique goal: get the user to delete it. Sounds weird, but the goal was to get the users a successful relationship so they could move on. Instead of giving users unlimited swipes, the app limited how many likes could be sent each day. And this completely changed behavior, because on Tinder and Bumble, many would just swipe on every profile. Now, you had to be more intentional about who you matched with instead of mindlessly swiping hundreds of profiles. Not only that, Hinge became especially popular with the Gen Z, at least those still using dating apps. Almost half of its user base is between 18 and 29. Plus, many users are paying users. So, what did Her do? Layoffs. Around 240 employees were cut in a single wave, bringing total layoffs to nearly 600 people in just 18 months. Meanwhile, Bumble's user base had already fallen from 58 million users to around 50 million. Then came the bigger shift in 3 parts. First, Bumble stopped trying to attract everyone, and instead only the right people. Basically, Her launched a major overhaul, which she called a quality reset, removing all kinds of fake accounts or low-intent users who lowered the dating experience and made it more spammy. Next came killing the swipe entirely, and with that change, Bumble also moved entirely away from the very thing that made it famous: woman messaging first. We will be basically bottling the essence of what was always meant to be women making the first move. A confident experience, a safe experience, a dynamic experience to get you offline in person on great dates and meetups. Jones had already somewhat removed that dynamic by this point anyway, and this was more an entire reset than what Jones did. But how would they do so? Well, take a guess. AI. Now, instead of women or even men doing the swiping, AI will become the matchmaker, specifically the in-app AI, Bee. Oh boy. Though it wouldn't encourage AI-generated photos or messages, thankfully. The AI tool will scan user data to learn their values, relationship goals, communication style, and lifestyle through private chats. Once Bee considers 2 people compatible, both are notified in the app with a summary explaining why they are a strong match. But it doesn't stop there. Bumble is basically moving to a date chosen for you instead of opting in or swiping, like scrolling on TikTok versus clicking a YouTube video. Not that swiping was really that great of a method in the first place, but annoying to see another app move to AI. Can Bumble turn things around? Well, their Q1 2026 revenue was also down as much as 14.1%, but earnings increased 165%. It seems the era of high growth is over. Now, Bumble is just trying to stay alive and profitable. Another app with an even stranger story is Be Real. This app exploded, but it quickly disappeared. Fans gradually got more and more annoyed with it, but even stranger, the founders seemed to have no plan on how to make money. Click here to learn the rest of that story, but until then, I'm Hari, and I'll see you guys on the next one.